To further set up Phase 3, we should introduce you to a criminal turned ally.
Those were up, and they did.
More smarts, and my...
He told me enough.
No, I.
Here's Chuck.
Hey everyone, it's Don G. Corleone here, and I'm here with a brand new movie review. And this movie review is going to be for the 12th installment of the franchise review series I am currently reviewing, and it's also the final installment of the second phase of this saga I'm reviewing. And introducing us to the third and final phase, and that's going to be none other than 2015's Ant-Man, which was originally going to be directed by Edgar Wright and then got replaced with Peyton Reed. What's the plot of this film? Well, armed with the astonishing ability to shrink in scale but increase in strength, conman Scott Lang must embrace his inner hero and help his mentor Hank Pym protect the secret behind a spectacular Ant-Man suit from a new generation of towering threats. Against seemingly insurmountable obstacles, Pym and Lane must plan and pull off a heist that will save the world. So how was this made? Well, development of an Ant-Man film began as early as the late 1980s, when Ant-Man co-creator Stan Lee pitched the idea to New World Pictures, Marvel Comics' parent company at the time. However, Walt Disney Pictures was developing a film based on a similar concept, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. And although Ant-Man went into development, nothing came into fruition. Then in 2000, Howard Stern met with Marvel in an attempt to purchase the film rights to Ant-Man. In May of that year, Arson Entertainment announced a deal with Marvel to co-produce, finance, and distribute a film based on Ant-Man. In 2003, Edgar Wright and his writing partner Joe Cornish wrote a treatment for Artisan, with Wright explaining that it revolved around Scott Lang as a burglar, so he could have gone slightly in the Elmore Leonard route. Though Artisan wanted the film to be like a family thing. However, Wright believed that the treatment was never sent to Marvel, and a year later, the duo pitched the film to Marvel Studios' then head of production Kevin Feige. In 2006, Marvel Studios hired Wright to direct and co-write Ant-Man with Cornish as part of the company's first day of independently produced films. And Wright would also co-produce the film with his Big Top Productions partner Nera Park. Then at the 2006 San Diego Comic-Con International, Wright said that he was intrigued in the story's high concept and character. Wright also stressed that the film would not be a spoof, but an action-adventure with some comedic elements that would incorporate both the Hank Pym and Scott Lang incarnations of the character. Wright said that he was looking to do a prologue when he see Pym as Ant-Man in action in the 60s. It's sort of Tales to Astonish mode, basically, and then the contemporary sort of flash forward in Scott Lang's story, and how he comes to acquire the suit, how he crosses paths with Hank Pym, and then an interesting story of McAllivan Way teams up with him. Then in next February, Wright said that the project wasn't a holding pattern, with the script being revised, and that he had been doing research for a film by studying nanotechnology. And in March 2008, Wright said that the first draft of the script had been completed and he was working on the second. Then Stan Lee even tweeted in February 2010 that Marvel was prepping the film and that he met with Wright for lunch to discuss the character. And Wright noted that there was no timetable for the film because Marvel did not consider the character to be one of their bigger tentpole properties. And it was more like him and Kevin Feige say that they were going to make a good script that works. It's all about a great genre film that isn't necessarily relying on anything else even. Then at the 2010 San Diego Comic-Con International, Wright even remarked that because this film would be an origin story, would not be released until after the Avengers. The first Avengers film would not include Ant-Man, although Wright acknowledged that the character might appear in future Avengers films. Then in May 2012, Feige said that the project was as close as it's ever been, with Wright teased the film by tweeting a pictogram of Ant-Man. Then in June, Wright spent just under a week shooting footage for a reel that would be used to test out the potential look and tone of his movie. and to decide how convincing Ant-Man's powers would look on screen. The test footage was screened to audiences during the Marvel Studios panel at the 2012 San Diego Comic-Con International, with Wright confirming that Ant-Man would be happening. German Lucier, a film, felt the footage worked and was awesome, so it had a totally different vibe from the other Marvel films. It was much more like something you wouldn't recognize from Hot Fuzz. Then Lucier, along with Katie Rich of Cinema Blend, also enjoyed the costume design choice, and Reed said the costume design was influenced by artists in Tokusatsu studio superheroes such as Ultraman and Inframan. And Disney even scheduled the film for release on November 6, 2015, originally at the time, but then they moved it upward or downward to July 17, 2015, and unfortunately, Edgar Wright would end up not directing the film. He would end up getting replaced with Peyton Reed, sadly. But after all that, and the film was shot and marketed, Ant-Man had its world premiere in Los Angeles on June 29, 2015, and was released in the United States in theaters on July 17, 2015, as the final film in Phase 2 of the MCU. At the box office, it was successful at the box office by grossing $519 million worldwide, not as much as some of their other properties, but it still received generally positive reviews from critics, who generally welcomed the film's smaller stakes than other MCU films, as well as its cast, particularly of Rudd, Pino, Lily, and Douglas, humor and visual effects. Of course, 2 sequels have been released, one being Ant-Man and the Wasp in 2018 for Phase 3, and Quantumania for Phase 5 of 2023, to kick off Phase 5. Now as for my reaction, well, I have to say, despite being one of the lesser known characters of Marvel, this would have to be my 3rd favorite film of Phase 2, and felt like it was a nice way to close off Phase 2 and begin Phase 3. Ant-Man is known to be a lesser known character of Marvel's, but by no means does that affect the quality of this movie. Like, first off, I thought that the casting of this film wasn't going to work. That had been Paul Rudd mainly because I had read a few of the Ant-Man comics and didn't think that was going to work. But I was wrong. He was totally brilliant, hilarious, and believable. All the jokes he made actually made me laugh out loud, which doesn't happen often much. Michael Pena was great in his film. Like, he plays the same kind of character he always seems to, but it really works. Especially the storytelling scenes that were hilarious. And this was all around well-cast film. The action and CGI was great. Like, on first thought, I thought when Ant-Man shrinks down that the CGI would take you out of the movie, but let me tell you, it doesn't. It's awesome, especially seeing the world from that size and scenes where Ant-Man is shrinking and enlarging when fighting. I thought he would get a little too much, but we honestly don't. Now it was not at all what I expected. Like, I'm a fan of some of the previous MCU movies. We don't have to be a fan of superhero movies to enjoy this movie. It has good pacing and holds your interest throughout, and there are plenty of action and fight scenes. And unlike the previous Marvel movies, the movie focuses on a heist. And this, along with the comedy throughout, makes it a breath of fresh air in the Marvel Universe. No Marvel movie since has so seamlessly bonded the genre of action and comedy. And I did not know anything about the Ant-Man, his origin abilities going in, apart from him being Giant Man. But this film made me a new fan of this cool superhero. Director Peyton Reed only had mostly comedies like Bring It On, Down with Love, and The Breakup in his resume. But with his first foray into the superhero genre, he totally made Ant-Man as exciting and riveting film that holds your attention from beginning to end with its excellent action and crackling humor. Reed took over from original directors and scriptwriter Edgar Wright, who dropped out of the project because of creative differences with Disney. And for me, like, the casting of Paul Rudd in the lead role came totally from left field. Like, usually, we all know his breakthrough role came as Josh in Clueless. Rudd was only relegated to playing mainly supporting roles in small, unmemorable comedies. However, like his Parks and Recreation co-star Chris Pratt's success with Star-Lord and Guardians of the Galaxy before him, Rudd actually fit right into the character of Scott Lang. Rudd had that good boy charm which was able to make us sympathize in this small-time crook desperately wanting to do good for the sake of his daughter Cassie. And as for Evangeline Lilly proved that the action skills she showed as the elf Tauriel in the last 2 Hobbit films were no fluke, though. Her whole Van Damme is fierce with attitude, with toned arms and shoulders to boot. And I do take exception to her annoying hairstyle that was reminiscent of that worn by Bryce Dallas Howard on Jurassic World. Like, what's up with that Dora do with the bands in Hollywood nowadays? During that time of the 2010s, like. And the role of Hank Pym could have been dry and didactic, but in the hands of another actor. Michael Douglas really made this character vital and interesting. His sense of humor was on point. His was the character that was connected, with everyone else being the original Ant-Man, and he had excellent working chemistry with everyone. Scott Hope and the villain Darren Cross, aka Yellow Jackets. And when it comes to the comic release are played by Michael Pena, David Desmalkin, and rapper T.I., who play this comedic trio of petty crooks whom Scott hangs around with, and they provide additional humor to the proceedings, especially when things get serious towards the climax. Bobby Cannavale played a clueless cop Paxton, who is like now the new husband of Scott's ex-wife Maggie, and stepfather to Cassie. I'll get to those two in a bit. His character basically makes Scott's life considerably more complicated, and I honestly don't really like his character in this film, but I'm gonna get to that stuff later. And the main character, Scott Lang, is probably one of the first MCU character protagonists to not be a billionaire scientist or ancient god. He doesn't have super strength or intelligence. He's this thief or mugger who deals with holding down a job and being able to see his daughter, and it makes him incredibly relatable. Being played by Paul Rudd doesn't hurt either. Rudd, along with the rest of the cast, delivers this memorable performance. The idea of a father trying to reconcile his relationship with his daughter may have been used before, but divinely Lily Michael Douglas make it work without seeming trite or overused. The role that really stands out is one of the roles that I thought was fine was Cora Stoll's Yellow Jacket. Honestly, I didn't really think his villain was that memorable. Then again, Marvel doesn't really do a lot of memorable villains. He's not nearly as generic as some of Phase 2's previous villains, or some of a little less generic. I think they kind of start to improve their villains around here a little bit, but just wasn't really that memorable. He was kind of a moron, even a little bit. Because he clearly doesn't even think his plan through a lot, and he's basically vaporizes this guy into glue, into slop or something, because he questioned his idea, and then literally just swipes up with a piece of toilet paper and flushes him in the toilet. Flushes his goop remains in the toilet. I don't find that intimidating. And Stoll's performance is more three-dimensional than one might expect a superhero movie. And then that's already great cast though. And some of the coolest and likable characters in the whole MCU appear in this movie. Every word that came out of Michael Pena's mouth just having stitches when I first saw this in theaters near the end of the summer. It was one of the many highlights of the movie, one in which Paul Rudd is a Tyler character with such charismatic character he graces the screen the majority of the scenes he's in. Well, any scene without Pena, that is, having such a likable person play down a very play on his lucky guy who's just trying to turn his life around and be a better father to his daughter really adds to the sympathy you feel for the character, and it makes you want him to succeed. And how they stuck to the mythos of Scott Lang, having him be a thief and crook, having him steal the suit from Hank Pym was straight out of the comics, and unlike with Tony creating Ultron instead of Pym, it's definitely one of the most close to the source material Marvel films to be released with just something a marvel in itself. All the little details like having the daughter of Hank Hope added into the mix, and the story of how Janet died wasn't exactly accurate, but it worked perfectly with the story. It seemed like a good way of going about it, and it added emotion and depth to the characters to make you care for them more, to which the critics often said there was no emotional weight. But when you have likable characters in a movie played by likable people and a well-written script to go along, you definitely start to feel sympathy for them in a way that doesn't feel shoehorned in. Again, the Black Widow Bruce Banner love interest, or the death of a certain character, it isn't forced in there out of the blue to make you care how they end up. You care because of how well they're written. You may feel like it's nitpicking bashing Age of Ultron, but I'm not. I still do like Age of Ultron, but those were some of my bad qualities with the film. The detours have a reason here. The reason is the right and wrong way to do it. This was definitely the right way. Now, when it comes to the villain Derek Cross, Yellow Jackets, he was fine, but he just wasn't top tier MCU villain like someone like Loki. And who else? Anybody? Ironmonger from him and Loki and Ironmonger from Iron Man. Just those two. Those two were kind of the only memorable MCU villains before Thanos and stuff. He wasn't in a huge deal. He wasn't really fleshed out though. But from the trailers, it kind of showed he wasn't really going to be. He does show some emotion and reasoning that could seem justifiable to some, but he never had a real just cause, other than just to try to copy Hank Pym's work. The story of why he was doing what he was doing wasn't really explained. He just seemed angry at Hank for tossing him aside, and it felt in a way like a good old-fashioned revenge story, with a slightly different agenda more than it did anything else. And it could have been a little more developed, but it's Marvel. What can you do? he was still at least kind of menacing, and Corey Stoll did portray him quite well considering what he was given in the script. Not going to do a really good movie without a man who transforms into a little man. How do you make it acceptable to people who are not aware of the comic world, but also keep it real with the fans of the Marvel Universe? Well, Marvel seems to have all the right answers to that. Because as always, there will be people who might... There's obviously people who don't like this movie, but I'm not one of them. And now moving on to the plot, I have to say, it truly is one of the better and special films Marvel has pulled off. The whole idea of empathizing on a heist brought to a whole new layer of excitement to this film, and the whole setup in the first act of the film was average at best, but when the second and third act came along, the film started to boost to hyperdrive. It was nothing but pure fun and hilariousness. It was built with great tension mixed with comic relief that worked as a whole. The dramatic elements of the film was moving and did not feel out of place more or less. Now the tie into the Avengers was surprising for most people. There were plenty of references that were even sure to bring a smile, and even bring some joy to some hardcore fans. And then on to the action and visuals of the film. Industrial light and magic always nails it once more. Whenever Ant-Man shrinks, and if you take a look at his surroundings, it looks so real because it is indeed real. Use of photorealistic CGI to enhance the background and insert Ant-Man in there provided a great 3D experience and gave way to excellent and sometimes snappy and well-timed action sequences. The action set pieces were small, however, the film brought in a large-scale feel into it. There's no city falling down, there's no headquarters being crushed by a helicarrier, but it felt so huge and grand that I was surprised it gave a great taste at the end of the film. Of course, the humor was still intact while that astonishing action was ongoing, which always provided to be a great mix when it comes to Marvel movies. I should also point out that the film was funny, and it's meant to be funny. You could tell the characters were not taking things 100% serious, and that was the point. And I do think people hate the film, do not understand that because they think it's too comical. They definitely missed the point of this movie, though. If you're expecting a serious film, you'll be disappointed, because this film's not supposed to be totally serious. It's supposed to be like a more fun popcorn flick, and that's what I liked about it. It actually knew what to do with the humor, right here. It actually made the comedy work in this one. Michael Pena was even hilarious in this movie. His lines are funny as hell. His recaps are even funny as hell. I love seeing Lewis's recaps. Even helps Ant-Man fight some bad guys. I thought the supporting cast were pretty decent because they did what they had to do and they were fine. There's also the cool way the writers tied into the rest of the Marvel Universe by referencing the Avengers. Specifically that scene with Ant-Man battling the Falcon, a cameo by Anthony Mackie on top of the Avengers headquarters. All this is even played with just the right sort of tongue-in-cheek humor while miniaturizing Scott Lang in the Ant-Man suit and having him sabotage Cross's plan to sell his updated technology to the goons from Hydra. And I also really like the scene where Scott has to steal a device that will aid their heist from the Avengers headquarters, which leads to the fight with Sam Wilson. Because it's a perfect setup for how he gets recruited to Team Cap in Civil War. The ending even further does it out of gratitude for Lane's even does too. Because out of gratitude for Lane's heroism, Jim Paxton decides to not let Lane go to prison. And seeing that Lane survived and returned to the Quantum Realm, Hank Pym wonders if his wife is alive as well, setting up the events for Ant-Man and the Wasp. You even get a little brief glimpse of the Wasp suit in the mid-credits. Then Lane meets up with Lewis, who tells him that Wilson is looking for him. Not only does that also set up Civil War, it also sets up Ant-Man and the Wasp. You even get a little teaser for Civil War, where Steve Rogers and Wilson and Bucky all cameo in the end credits, where they're debating what to do with Bucky, and know they can't go to Tony because he signed the Accords and they're fugitives, because that's pretty much a scene for the movie. And then Falcon says he knows someone that can help them, and it's a perfect setup for Scott's role in Civil War, even if it wasn't that huge. So it was perfect there. However, if there are any bad qualities, I just thought once again, like I mentioned, I thought Darren Cross was once again just a boring generic villain like a lot of MCU's villains are. Not saying that he's a bad actor, because he was definitely not, and I still thought he gave a good performance for what he was given. He just felt like the same old as the villain progressed. The role of the villains became an issue inside the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Aside from Loki, Ironmonger, Thanos, Zemo, Killmonger, and Alexander Pierce, all the other villains sound and feel just the same. It was no different from Yellow Jacket. Although Yellow Jacket was kind of an improvement from some of the previous MCU villains before in the Phase 2 stuff, you don't really see him as a big threat here, but as this butthurt guy trying to prove he's better than anyone else. And I also feel that Hope Van Dam was a really annoying and unlikable in this film, but while she does get a bit more likable in the later half and a bit more likable in the sequel, I just found her character just really annoying in these Ant-Man films. Like, I just never been a big fan of her character. I did like Yvonne Lilly's performance, but Hope was just never my favorite. For good reasons. And some other characters I also find really unlikable and annoying were Maggie Lane and Jim Paxton. Oh my god, I just really don't like this. I also just really don't like this couple in these two movies. I mean, they're just not enjoyable to watch. They also really annoy me. At times, they just come off as just snotty, stuck up, and rude. At times, I mean, I'm not bashing Greer or Connell's performances and stuff. Like, I still thought the performances were good. I'm bashing the characters and just because of the script and bad development their characters got here. They're slightly better in the sequel, but it's not really saying much. Because, like, I just really hate they get so mad at Scott just for showing up at Cassie's birthday just as he got out of jail. Has a criminal record, and he doesn't have a job. Like, come on. Even if that's true, Scott's her real dad, and he just got out of jail, so he deserves to see his daughter after getting out of jail and be there for his own daughter on her birthday because Scott's her real father, not Jim Paxton. And I really hate when even Jim Paxton says, no, you should be ashamed showing up here. I would arrest you right away if I was even able to. Like, oh my god. It's like wow. And on top of that, the movie does feel structurally odd. The entire second half is essentially one long train montage and it drags. It's entertaining in spots, but ultimately it barely moves the story forward in any significant way. It's Lane sort of amusingly learning his skills while we get massive amounts of exposition about rules of the world, especially rules around ants. However, despite those nitpicks or bad qualities I have, I still find Ant-Man to be a pretty good send-off to Phase 2, and a perfect little setup for the third and final phase of the Infinity Saga that's going to be getting reviewed in April, very soon. In the end, Ant-Man is a perfect introduction to a new character in the MCU and a nice setup for the third and final phase of the Infinity Saga, and I would definitely recommend watching and buying for your collection for sure. Anyways, that's it for my review of Ant-Man. If you're wondering how I'm going to rank Ant-Man, here's how I'm going to rank this movie. So overall, if you want to see a new character get introduced and want to see the perfect send-off for Phase 2, then I would definitely recommend watching and buying this movie for your collection for sure. And if you're wondering how I'm going to rank Ant-Man, I'm going to give Ant-Man an 8.5 out of 10. There we go. That wraps up my review for Ant-Man. And with that, guys, that wraps up Phase 2's reviews. And that's going to be a wrap on the MCU again until in a few weeks, in April. So it's not going to be until April. So it's not going to be a very long wait. Not as long of a wait as the gap between Phase 1 and 2 was. But yeah, now we're on to the third and final phase of this whole MCU series. Man, it's been a very huge series. And we have one more phase to go. So this is going to be quite a busy rewatch this upcoming month. Because there's a lot of films in Phase 3. And I'm going to be leaving out the Spider-Man films that were in Phase 3. The Spider-Man films I'm going to be saving for the Spider-Man series in May. So yeah. Because I mentioned the Spider-Man review series because I'm going to be reviewing the Spider-Man series in May to prep for Across the Spider-Verse in June. Until then, guys, that'll be it for this review. Thank y'all for watching. If you like this, want to see more, don't forget to like, subscribe to Don G. Corleone.